Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu.
You hear me?
Yes, Prabhu.
All right. Very good. Hare Krishna. All right, are we ready?
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Om
Yes, Prabhu.
Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manavishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tatati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padkamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Bhaganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvahutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vikamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So remember to try to turn on your video if you can. And we are entering the 4th verse of this wonderful book, Upadek Samrita, the Nectar of Instruction. Hare Krishna. Tadati pratigrinanti guyam akyapti prichyati bhunte bhojayate choiva sadvidham pritilakshanam. Offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasad, and offering prasad are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. So before we get into the specifics of this verse, let's just look at it as an overall, in a general sense. We have to, one of the secrets of success as a devotee is to learn how to associate with devotees. And in one sense, it's very simple. We serve them. Whether they're big devotees or small devotees or beautiful devotees or ugly devotees, that doesn't matter. We recognize philosophically that Krishna loves them. And therefore, if we serve them, Krishna will be pleased. Prabhupada gives a simple example that if, I think he even used the example of walking along the beach in Juhu. We know in Juhu's kind of well-to-do, a wealthy area in a slightly north part of Mumbai. And if there's a rich man walking with his son, and what can you offer the rich man? He's got 2 Mercedes and a big house and all this, that, so many servants. But if you give the son a 1 or 2 rupee sweet, then the father will be very happy. So similarly, Krishna has everything. He doesn't need anything from us. But if we please his devotees, then just like the wealthy man, Krishna will be pleased. So this is well, I can't say the secret, but a secret of success in devotional service is to serve devotees. And it puts us in the right mindset. If we're a senior devotee, we serve devotees. If we're a junior devotee, we may serve a little differently, right? Jai Pataka Maharaj may be serving devotees differently than you and me, but we're all serving devotees. He's in the mood of serving devotees. You're in the mood of serving devotees. No one is the enjoyer. No one is the Ishwaraham Mahambogi. No one is the big cheese. We're all Gopi Batur Padakamalayur Dasa Dasa Das Anudas. And even in the spiritual world, we become the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. And what's so interesting is in the spiritual world, when you serve the servants of the servants of the servants, you feel more direct connection with Krishna than if you go to Krishna directly. So we want to very much enter this mood, and this verse is all about this. Give up our ego, give up criticizing devotees, serve devotees. Find a way to serve devotees, and guaranteed you'll feel happy because Krishna will be pleased with you. So that's the overview of this verse. Now we can get into some of the details. But before we do that, any questions or comments on this general principle?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Yes, Prabhu.
I think this is the most important thing, like you said, in terms of following the principles of the philosophy. But I also feel that this becomes the most difficult thing to follow. That's my thought, Prabhu.
Well, yes, but that's why Rupa Goswami is so kind, because he's going to tell us how to do it. Right? He's going to give us 6. We just read them 6 things. You give prasad. Is it really hard? Achyuta Prabhu, is it that hard to give another devotee prasadam?
Not really.
Not so hard. Is it hard to eat prasadam when someone offers it to you?
Definitely not.
So there are 33%. It's very easy. Yes. So we can invite devotees to our house. Of course, sometimes maybe with COVID, I don't know what the restrictions are now in India. It may be difficult. But that's why Rupa Goswami is writing this verse. He's actually showing us it's not so hard. Not so hard. But I see your point, Prabhu. Okay, Krishna, we can serve Krishna, but devotees? That devotee, don't you know that he, you know what he used to do before he was a devotee? Oh my God. That's how the mind thinks. So this is a great opportunity to, and the thing is that this will attract people to Krishna consciousness. If people come in the association of devotees, they come to the temple there in Bangalore, and they see that everyone is getting along with each other. Everyone is very nice to each other. Everyone is trying to serve the other person. It's very attractive. It's very attractive. I noticed this. I'm not in ISKCON, but I noticed it one time I visited a Gurudwara, and they're very into doing seva there, right? And they really were, and you could feel it in the atmosphere. So similarly, if we are in the mood of serving one another, it'll be very, very attractive. We will make many, many, many devotees, and they'll be very inspired to make more devotees and to spread the Sankirtan movement.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Is that all right, Achyuta Prabhu? Santik?
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Anything else on this basic principle before we get into the details? Okay. Well, did somebody? No? Okay. All right. So let's look at the purport. So one thing Prabhupada says, when a devotee distributes prasadam, we must accept this prasad. That's easy, right, Achyuta? That's easy. But it is important. We don't, if somebody gives us prasad, even if we're on a very special diet, we're very sick or something, and someone gives us, we're not supposed to have any sweets, and someone gives us what's a very sweet thing, a gulab jamun, right? So we say, no, just give me, this much, but we have to honor it, or at least give me the tulsi leaf or something. But the idea is if somebody's offering you prasad, you have to take it, even if it's, it could be this much also, and it may be this much, but it's a principle. It's we have to honor the prasad. This is Krishna personally coming to you in the form of prasad, and we can't go, no. We can, at a meal, we can say, no, I have had enough. But if someone gives us Mahaprasad, and you can take Mahaprasad and even in front of the deities. Generally, we don't take a full meal in front of the deities, right? But you can take Mahaprasad in front of the deities. So even if they just, you've seen that, right? Sometimes somebody will, and you'll a devotee would just give you a little piece that I need, but then, respect that prasad. So that's the first thing here. And then Prabhupada says something very sweet. He says that even in ordinary social activities, these 6 types of dealings between 2 loving friends are absolutely necessary. And right, he says that, one businessman wishes to contact another businessman. He arranges a feast in a hotel, and over the feast, he openly expresses what he wishes to do. Right? Then he inquires from his business friend how he should act. Sometimes presents are exchanged. And then Prabhupada writes, thus, whenever there is a dealing of priti or love in intimate dealings, these 6 activities are executed. So I think many of us who are working in corporate companies, they know this sometimes. You have to go out to lunch with a client, right? Or something like that. And then during the lunch, you sometimes talk little business, and it, so now so that's for non-devotees. So what to speak of in ISKCON? And therefore, in the next sentence, Prabhupada said, in the previous verse, Srila Rupa Goswami advised that one should renounce worldly association and keep the company of devotees. Sangha tyagat sato brite. So now listen to this sentence. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness has been established. Why? To facilitate these 6 kinds of loving exchanges between devotees. So first, Prabhupada says it's a universal thing. We do this in business. I would assume also in families, maybe we come together for Diwali or some big festival. Right? I'm not talking about devotees, but just in general for big holiday. Here in America, people come for Thanksgiving or Christmas like that, right? And there's some talk, there's exchange of food. If it's Diwali or if it's Christmas, there's some exchange of gifts, yeah, right? Generally like that. So these are very, and Prabhupada said ISKCON has been established to facilitate these 6 exchanges, but with who? Amongst devotees. Amongst devotees. So we should take this verse very seriously. It's not just, it's so nice, sweet thing. It's something that we should really try to figure out, how can I apply this in my life? How can I invite some devotees over for prasad? Right? You invite them over prasad, you have a little kirtan, maybe a little discussion, you take prasad, you ask, how's the family? Maybe the men talk to the men, ladies talk to the ladies, they start revealing their minds to each other like this. Or we go to, but even with non-devotees, of course, it's a little different, but still we go to work, we bring some prasad and we distribute it like that. I think I told you when I used to do trainings for the judges in the High Court and Supreme Court, I used to get all these laddus from the temple, and I'd bring like 150 laddus to the program, and all the judges are taking prasad, like that. So ISKCON has been established to facilitate these 6 kinds of loving exchanges between devotees. Okay. And then a little later, Prabhupada says, in this way, our society is successfully spreading all over the world by facilitating these 6 exchanges. And then he says, the life of the Krishna conscious society is nourished by these 6 types of loving exchanges among the members. So so ISKCON is nourished by these loving exchanges. Therefore, people must give the chance to associate with the devotees of ISKCON, because simply by reciprocating in the 6 ways mentioned above, an ordinary man can fully revive his dormant Krishna consciousness. So we have to also do these exchanges of love with people who are, potentially becoming devotees. And if they start reciprocating with us, Prabhupada says that this will revive their dormant Krishna consciousness. It'll awaken it. It'll wake up. And Prabhupada quotes chapter 2, verse 62, Sangat Sanjayate Kama. One's desires and ambitions develop according to the company one keeps. It is often said that a man is known by his company. And if an ordinary man associates with devotees, he will certainly develop his dormant Krishna consciousness. So yes, there's a saying in many languages that you tell me who you associate with, I'll tell you who you are. Right? Yeah, isn't it? Very much. We're very affected by our association. And that's why we want to associate with devotees. And sometimes I said we try to associate with devotees, and especially those that are at least a little, if not a lot, more advanced than us. Because Krishna consciousness is caught as much as it's taught. You see how a devotee lives. You see how a devotee thinks by associating with them, and you pick up that mood. You pick up that consciousness. It's very powerful. Very powerful. So. Any questions or comments so far?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, then Mr. Pranam, this is Prem Datta Chaitanya Das Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, when we are in material, this thing, as Prabhupada is saying here, that we sometime on business, this thing, we go and meet and try to build relationship and do business thing. But within the, when we are doing with devotees, it is, it's out of love. It should be, ideally, it should be a loving exchange when we are calling somebody for prasadam. And loving exchange is primarily based on, how we go well with a particular devotee, right? So how to ensure it's not a honoring prasadam or calling somebody for prasadam is not a monotonous exercise. It is it's just not done out of formality, but out of pure love for the devotee.
Well, Prem Datta Chaitanya Prabhu, sometimes there's a saying in the West, maybe you've heard this in India also, fake it until you make it. So sometimes, we may have to go through the, even if we don't fully have it in the heart, we try anyway. Okay, and slowly, we develop that consciousness. But it's a good point. And we spoke about this with Niyamagraha. Remember Niyamagraha and Niyamagraha. And Niyamagraha is when you just go through the motion, but you're not trying to make advancement. So we should. I think you experience this. I'm sure everyone on the call has experienced. Maybe you've been at a temple or at someone's house, and when somebody's really serving you prasad with a real kind heart, and when somebody's just kind of like sometimes at a temple, they're just slapping it on your plate, and they're just like, they really would rather not be serving prasadam at all. I think we talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago. So we know what's happening, and or if somebody's giving you a gift, you know what it's like sometimes if someone really does it wonderfully, right? They say, "My dear Prabhu, please, dear Prem Tata Chaitanya Prabhu, you please accept this, please, you know," and you can tell. What did Prabhupada say? We should have a heart like a Bengali mother, right? Like that. So, but I'm glad you're asking this question, because we don't want to just go through the process without doing it with bhakti. And that's, Krishna says that so clearly. If you read, patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhaktya prayachati taraham bhakti paritam. He mentions bhakti twice in that verse. So we should do it in the right consciousness, but we also shouldn't say, "I'm not in the right consciousness, therefore I'm not going to give anyone any prasadam, no gifts, no exchange of my mind, bus. Not until I become pure devotee. Then no." We go through the motions and we try to do the best we can. Is that all right, Prabhu?
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Wonderful question. Sugunamayi. I don't know what the V stands for, but Devi Dasi. Prabhuji, what in case any devotee would have done any service or any help for us, and later stage, sometimes if they keep remembering the same seva, or any seniors or the juniors keep mentioning when the time comes, "I have done this for you," how should the person who received the service should react? Well, first let's talk about the person who says that. We should at least try not to do that. We don't do service so that later we can get something from them. Then that's like Dhruva Maharaj, right? Said, "My dear Lord, this is not a business deal. We serve devotees to please them and to please Krishna, and not so that later on we can say, 'Oh, do you remember when, you were sick and I brought you prasad? Now, my turn. Please, I need to borrow 5 lakh rupees. Okay, please give.'" You're so, you know what I mean? So, and we know that that's very much in the material world. That's very much, we have this "I scratch your back, you scratch mine" kind of mentality, right? In the world. But we're trying to avoid that in ISKCON. We're trying to avoid that in Krishna consciousness. We're trying to adopt pure bhakti, which we'll be studying in the next book, Nectar of Devotion. Anya abhilasita sunyam. Other desires than serving Krishna, sunyam, 0. So we want to try to just offer the service to please. We talked about this, I think, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, that traditionally in India, we would see, like when I first came to India in the 1980s, and I would meet some elderly gentlemen who had been like through partition and this and that. And they very much had this duty idea, karma nevari karaste, mafaleshu kadachana. I do this because it's meant to be done. Maybe some of you remember your parents or your grandparents. They were very much like that, kind of very pakka, not necessarily devotees, but they were very dutiful, and they understood that idea that, I will do my duty, whether pleasure, pain, I do the right thing. So, we try to please Krishna and Guru and the Vaishnavas, and we don't, say, "What am I going to get out of this?" We try not to. I know it's very much still there in the heart sometimes, but we try to purify that. And I'm doing this for Krishna's service. If anyone sometimes even, who was it who did service for their guru and tried to do it so the guru would never notice who it was? Anyone remember that story? I think was it Narottama Das Thakur with Lokanath Goswami? he would go for the call of nature, and then
Yes,
after
Prabhu.
he would leave, Narottam would secretly, so no one saw him, he'd
Yeah.
clean that area.
In that.
So I know this is as Mataji is pointing out here in the chat, that it's a little foreign to us to develop that pure bhakti, but that's what we want. Now, her question though was, what do we do if somebody says that to us? They say, Prabhu, do you remember you were having some problem, a few years ago, and I let you use my car for a week so that you could go to work because your car was broken? Well, now I need something from you. So first of all, we acknowledge, oh, thank you so much. That was so kind of you to let me use your car that time. And I don't know what I can do, but if I can somehow reciprocate, I will certainly do that. That should be our mood. The other person, whether they're pure or not pure, that's not my business. My business is if I can, I reciprocate. I shouldn't feel forced to. I shouldn't feel that just because you lent me your car for a week, now I have to lend you 5 lakh rupees or 1 crore or whatever. No, it has to be reasonable. But so, there's always the philosophical and the practical. Philosophical is we try to help. Practical, see if it's practical. I hope that's okay, Mataji. And then Mani Kandan Balachandran. Acha, TK. Can we accept the prasad which was offered to demigods such as Shiva? If someone offered such prasad, how do we react on that? Well, it's tricky, isn't it? It's a little tricky. Generally, we don't want to hurt their feelings, right? And of course, Lord Shiva is a great, great devotee. Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu. So just like if we had Srila Prabhupada's remnants, we would take it in a second, right? So Lord Shiva's remnants, we would also take. Did I tell you the story about Prabhupada in Hong Kong with the Lord Shiva temple?
No, Prabhu.
Okay, so Prabhupada was in
Love to
Hong
hear.
Kong. Prabhupada was in Hong Kong, and the pujari from the Shiva temple came and was very respectful and invited Prabhupada to visit their temple. And Prabhupada said, yes, I must come. And so after that, the pujari left. One of the devotees said, Prabhupada, that they worship Lord Shiva there. And Prabhupada got very angry. He said, and you tell them not to worship Lord Shiva? And then the devotee said, but Prabhupada, they worship Lord Shiva as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Oh, then we should not go. So he was okay with them worshiping Lord Shiva, but not worshiping him on the same level as Krishna, because we know that's one of the offenses against the holy name. So if they're worshiping Lord Shiva properly as an anga of Krishna, then certainly we would take that prasad, right? Because then it's a Vaishnava's prasad. I don't know if they're worshiping him as the supreme. It may be tricky. So I think it's a question of time, place, and circumstance. What do you all think? Anyone here have thoughts on this? I don't. Here in America, we don't deal with this very often. And even in Vrindavan, I would certainly take the prasad of Gopeshwari Mahadev, right? The Shiva Linga in Vrindavan, who is one of the 4 protectors of the holy Dham. Definitely, Pakka, I would take in Vrindavan for sure. But anyone have any realization about this that you'd like to share? I mean, we sometimes go to I don't know what to say. I probably asked one of my senior preachers in India what they do in such situations. I was going to say that sometimes we go to a hotel and we order something because we have to do a business lunch, and you would think that Lord Shiva's prasad is going to be more elevated than the food at that restaurant, right? You have some thoughts, Rasa Sindhu, Prabhu?
Well, yes, Prabhu. See, like as you mentioned about accepting prasad in Vrindavan from Gopishwar Mahadev temple, and if you look at most of the holy dhams across India, Lord Shiva is the Kshetrapalaka of most of the places.
Yeah.
And so I personally don't see any harm in accepting prasad there, because maybe some of them may be worshipping these demigods as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without having the complete knowledge from the scriptures. But ultimately the scriptures are clear that Supreme Personality of Godhead is Lord Krishna, and all the other demigods
Right.
work under his direction or control. So maybe there is ignorance involved, but the fact does not change that Supreme Personality of Godhead is Lord
It's
Krishna.
Krishna.
Since
I
we
think
have
what
the
I-
knowledge, I think we should accept it.
I think what I would do is I would go, yes, just give me just this much. I'll take one grain of rice. Okay. Hare Krishna. But I wouldn't, I probably would try to avoid a big meal like that. Of course, Prabhupada said in this purport, he talks about going to life members' homes and taking prasad. So we'll get to that. Let's see if there's maybe one other question, and then I think we should move on. Amol Set says, lots of time we take up good qualities from our parents and grandparents, and that's how Brahmin persons mostly become Brahmin and Kshatriya mostly become Kshatriya. That's how it got spread of birth in family got misinterpreted. Yes, the lines in ancient times before Kali Yuga, the lines were very pure. People would marry very, very, very carefully. Now it's all kitri, right? But originally it was so you would have these very pure lines, right? And you could see that in Karna, for example. Karna came from that very pure line. So even though he was brought up by someone else, he couldn't, his nature was still very much intact. Yeah, very much intact. And let's see, Vidit Kumar says,
Prabhu.
yes.
Sorry, Prabhu. I have one small doubt, Prabhuji. I have keep hearing that Shiva is the great devotee of the Lord, and we keep doing like before honoring prasadam, we offer to the Lord and then we take it. So I think even all the demigods, they do the same thing. When they receive anything from us, they will offer it to Krishna, and then they will take it as a Mahaprasad. In that way, I consider, I don't know whether I'm wrong or right. I have to just advise me. So any Shiva or any other demigod's prasadam is also Mahaprasadam?
No. Yeah, you're correct that you can worship the demigods appropriately. Bharat Maharaj did that in the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, because they're worshiping the demigod as an anga of Krishna. But many people are not doing that, right? I mean, you all were born and raised in India. You know that not everyone who's worshiping a demigod is worshiping them in that way, and it's like otherwise, why would Krishna talk so much in Bhagavad Gita about demigod worship, right? The 9th chapter, the 7th chapter, especially those 2 chapters. He uses the phrase alpa medasa. Medasa means intelligence, and alpa means very little. So I don't know. So your question though is different. Do the demigods offer it to Krishna? My understanding is that generally not. In the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in the beginning, it said that the demigods don't know Krishna. The great sages and the dem. Now, some of them obviously do, but often they don't. They're enamored. They're into their own form of enjoyment in this world. And I can, let's see, I just read that verse recently. I think it's chapter 10. Is it verse 3? Maybe it's verse 2. Yes, verse 2. Here, let me share my screen so you can read it. Neither the host of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulences, for in every respect I am the source of the demigods and sages. So they don't know Krishna necessarily. I don't know if it says something in the next verse also. But one who knows me is the unborn, as the beginningless, as the supreme Lord of all worlds. He alone, undiluted amongst men, is free from all sins. So yeah, I wouldn't say that everything that gets offered to the demigods gets offered to Krishna. No, that's not. Matter of fact, we see that in the Daksha Yagya, right? They're not all offering everything. They all want their, as we say, their piece of the action in the Yagya. Okay, I hope that's helpful. And let's see, Vini Kumar. Generally, if we call someone to our house, it is based on our liking. In other words, we call devotees who we associate with. How can we? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being selective. There's this word that Bhaktivinoda uses, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I just put it in the chat. Swajatiya. So literally, we understand, right? Jati means almost like caste, right? And swa means the same or with. So we're not talking about caste here, right? Because we're not caste conscious. But it means, Prabhupada translates it as like-minded. So naturally, we tend to associate with like-minded people. And that's okay. That's the general mood. The only problem with that is sometimes then you don't expand your consciousness. You only associate with people who have the same ideas as you, right? And sometimes it's very helpful to expand it, to hear how other people see the world. And we may learn more about Krishna consciousness by associating with a devotee who's a devotee like us, but preaches in a different way, or sees the philosophy through a different angle of vision. So that's the only problem. If we only associate with like-minded people, we kind of may not grow so quickly. We see this in the non-devotee world. I don't know what it's like in India right now. It's been 10 years since I lived in India. But here in America, you have the Democrats and the Republicans. And there are websites for Democrats. There's websites for Republicans. There's TV news for Democrats. There's TV news for Republicans. And everyone goes to their corner, the one that they believe in, and they never hear the other side. And so they don't get a full picture of what's actually going on because they only hear it through this one lens. So it's natural that we're going to invite over friends. That's totally natural. The only thing I'm saying is don't be afraid also to associate with people that may think a little differently than you. I hope that is okay. Be neat. Sumitra Gopal Prabhu, normally we don't reveal our minds in confidence, Prabhuji, and keep things to ourselves, thinking out of fear that if the other devotee would start judging us, knowing our weaknesses, is it right approach, Prabhuji, or we should share without fearing for anything? Well, great. This is a great question, Sumitra Gopal Prabhu. If we share we have to be careful, okay? Because if we tell the wrong person, then it might end up on Facebook, right? Or, send out an email to 500 people. Oh, Vraj Vihari, I saw him drinking some wine the other day, whatever, And everyone knows, even though I was just trying to tell, I don't know, Vineet Kumar, I was just trying to tell him, Prabhu, I'm having this problem. And he just puts it on email, right? So we obviously were a little careful about that. But it really helps when you can reveal your heart to someone. It's almost like a big weight that's on your shoulders gets lifted. So we have to try to find someone that we can really trust. It's said that you're very fortunate if you only even have 2 or 3 good friends in this world. But people you can really totally give your heart to and you can trust. Then you're very, 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 very fortunate. Because even the ability, even if they don't give you any advice, just the ability to talk like that, it's very, very helpful. So you're right, Prabhu, that this is the hardest one of these 6, is revealing one's mind in confidence and inquiring confidentially. We have so much trouble with this one. And that's why in India recently, last 6 months, I started the ombudsman service. And I won't go into details right now, but an ombudsman is a person that you can say anything to, and he or she will not repeat it to anyone. They've been totally taken a brat, a vow of confidentiality. A lot of it is about dealing with conflicts, but you can also tell an ombudsman about your problems, your challenges following the 4 regulated principles or whatever. And they won't, for sure, they're 100% been trained. They cannot repeat it to anyone else. But it's a very good point, Prabhu. And let's see, boy, there's a lot of questions. Ratika Mataji, during a class on Mahashivaratri, we were told that we can take Shiva Prasad to give respect and kindly pass it over to some devotee of Shiva around you. Shiva Prasad should sometimes distribute in the form of Bhang. Yeah, well, obviously we want to avoid Bhang, right? Which we should not take. Okay, thank you for that. And Murari Madhava, Prabhu, if we do not accept prasad of demigods, do they get angry for not accepting their prasad and cause any harm, or do not bless? Is there a chance that if we accept their prasad, then they are pleased and they bless us to progress in Krishna consciousness? Well, that gets a little tricky, right? Because you could say, well, are the demigods angry at Krishna when Krishna keeps on saying in the Bhagavad Gita, don't worship the demigods? And actually, the demigods are pleased when we worship Krishna. The demigods, because as Mataji pointed out before, they may be Sakama devotees, but they're still devotees. They may have some material desires. And so the only reason we wouldn't take demigod prasad is because it could interrupt our seva to Lord Krishna. And that's our goal. So therefore, I suggest the easiest thing is you just take 1 grain or something, or just get a little piece, Hare Krishna, like that. Then the demigods won't be upset. The person giving you the prasad won't be upset. And you don't have to eat a whole meal of that you're in anxiety. Is this okay? Is it not okay? Oh my God. So let's continue. I have to go back because I was in the Bhagavad Gita here. So a little later, Prabhupada says, since Krishna consciousness is inherent in every living entity, and he quotes this verse from the Madhya Lila, very good verse to memorize. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhu Kapanoi, Shavanadi Sudachite Koriye Udoy. Since Krishna consciousness is inherent in every living entity, everyone should be given a chance to hear about Krishna. Simply by hearing and chanting, one's heart is directly purified and one's original Krishna consciousness is immediately awakened. Krishna consciousness is not artificially imposed upon the heart, it is already there. That's what this verse says. It's such an important sentence. Krishna consciousness is not artificially imposed upon the heart, it is already there. This is one of the most important things to understand in Krishna consciousness, this verse. Madhya Lila, chapter 22, verse 107. Pure love for Krishna is eternally established in the hearts of all living entities. It is not something to be gained from another source. When the heart is purified by hearing and chanting, that love naturally awakens. This is such a deep meditation. So even that person who says, no, I don't want a book, I'm not interested in, no. They still actually are pure lovers of Krishna, but it's just not udhoy. It's just not, that's a Bengali, it's not awakened, right? So when we go out and try to give people Krishna consciousness, we're trying to help them remember what they've forgotten. It's not that we're giving something that is foreign, something that is outside and making them a devotee like that. It's there right in their heart. And our attempt is to try to awaken it. It's a very wonderful, beautiful meditation when you think about it. And sometimes, let's say you make some mistake in Krishna consciousness. If you remember this verse, you remember, no, I'm actually a pure lover of Krishna. Okay, I made some mistakes, but that's who I am. That's actually who I am. So let me carry on with my bhakti. Don't get too upset with yourself. Sometimes we really beat ourselves up, you know. Oh, I'm so bad. I'm so low. I'm lower than the worm in stool. I'm lower than the stool inside the worm. You know, we can really get into that. But this verse reminds us that ultimately we are pure lovers of Krishna, and so is everybody else. Very nice verse. If you want to memorize the verse, Nitya Siddha, Krishna Prema, Sadhu Kabunoy, Shavanadi Sudichite, Koreye Udoy. Very nice. So then Prabhupada talks. So he's talking about this verse. If you study this purport carefully, now Prabhupada's talking about spreading Krishna consciousness, Jiva Dvaya. Then he quotes the verse Cheto Darpana Marjanam, right? The first verse of the Shikshastika, right? And then he quotes Haridas Thakur, and he says that even souls embodied in lower animals, insects, trees, and other species of life also become purified and prepared to become fully Krishna conscious simply by hearing the transcendental vibration. And then he talks about Lord Chaitanya in the Jharkhanda forest, chanting and making the tigers Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada says, don't, what do they say? Don't try this at home. Don't go up to tigers and say, chant. But I know here in America, there's very beautiful walking trails in the forest. Right, many, so many right here near our temple in Washington, D.C. There's a beautiful river right near our temple. So I know when I go into the forest, I try to remember this, and if I'm chanting my rounds, I try to chant very loudly, so that the trees and the insects and everyone can get benefited by hearing the holy name. So that's very beautiful. And then Prabhupada says, yes, by preaching the holy name, that is the Dadati principle. It's giving gifts. Giving someone a book is a wonderful, wonderful gift. And then Prabhupada talks about the members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness invite the society's members and supporters to dine with them when they hold love feasts in all their branches every Sunday. Many interested people come to honor prasad, and whenever possible, they invite members of the society to their home and feed them sumptuously with prasad. So we just have to be a little careful. Sometimes we think, oh, so-and-so life member, they have such opulent prasad. I really hope they invite me to their house. Right, so we have to be a little careful about that, because that's not really the pure bhakti. But if we get invited to someone's house and we have to sometimes be a little careful, hopefully at least they're vegetarians, right? And hopefully they're vegetarians and no onions, no garlic, like that. We can even say that to people. Well, they'll appreciate it if we do it nicely. Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. I just need you to know I have some, I've taken some vows of some dietary restrictions. And then before you eat, you can offer it even in your mind, or if it's a life member, you can say, I hope you don't mind, I can say some prayers. And Prabhupada even said that we can offer prasadam. It's in the Perfection of Yoga book. We can offer prasadam by saying Sharira Avijajal Jatendriya Tehekal, etc. That's one way of offering. I mean, it's not the general way. The general way is to say our spiritual master's pranams 3 times, Prabhupada's pranams, Namo Mahabharanyaya 3 times, and the prayers to Krsna, Namo Brahmanya Devaya 3 times, right? And then if we're Brahmin initiated, we chant at least, either the first line or the Gopal mantra. That's the more Paka way. But we can, in offer things if we're kind of in a rush. Sharira Vijajal. Mukunda Maharaj used to live here in Washington, D.C., and he would go out every night visiting people's homes. But because, he's sannyasi, and also because he didn't want to eat late at night. So even though it was very upsetting at first, especially for the Gujarati people, because they love to feed you, right? But he said, only milk and some fruit, bus. And they after a while, they surrendered to that. and they were okay. So just milk and fruit, and he would take that like that. So but he's a Paka Sadhu, one of Prabhupada's first disciples. Right. So yes, we may be invited to, but we shouldn't just think I'm going to preach to that person because his wife is such a good cook. Now I'm going to get some in temple. I just get some some rice bus, or whatever. But if I go to their house, there's going to be sambar, there's going to be idli, there's going to be rasam, it's going to be wonderful. So we don't do that just for our tongue. So some questions or comments on these points?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, this is Premdatta Chaitanya. That's regarding, I just wanted to add one thing regarding the demigods, this thing. I have one practical incident, Prabhuji, that we on Hanuman Jayanti, we went to one of the prominent temple in Bangalore for book distribution. And along with some devotees who are here also, they are attending, they know this. So we were then looking at it merciful because we were doing service that those devotees came with prasadam in Dona. And, it was Hanuman Jayanti, and we asked them, did you offer to Hanuman? It is offered to the Lord. Yeah, it is offered to the Lord.
Yes.
No, but another thing, we were surprised to see that prasadam had onion in it, Prabhu.
Acha.
So what I'm saying, it is like we may feel like, okay, but devotees, what standard they are following, and, we never know. So we just wanted to share this experience.
Well, we want to be careful. On when we're out preaching, we have to do the needful sometimes. Do not take advantage of this, okay? I'm going to tell you something, but do not misinterpret it. One time Prabhupada told the book distributors, because when we do our traveling Sankirtan, we're not near a temple. So we can't offer prasadam to, we have to do the needful. And so one time devotees explained this to Prabhupada, and he said, just preach. As far as eating, eat any damn thing, but just preach. He actually said that. Now don't misinterpret that. If we can offer things nicely, but the point was that if you're out distributing books and you're starting to get a little hungry, instead of going to buying some sabji, going back to your van, cooking it, offering it, eating it, 2.5 hours have just passed, and 2.5 hours you could have been distributing books, right? So you get some fruit, you get some, I don't know, Parley G or whatever, and you get back on Sankirtan, and Lord Chaitanya will protect you, But generally, we want to be careful. That story. Again, don't take license from this. But they were at a life member's home, and there was onions in the prep, and the devotee was saying, Prabhupada, there's onions in the prep. Prabhupada said, no, there's not. There's no onions. Prabhupada, there's definitely onions in the prep. And Prabhupada said, there are no onions. Eat it. Because he didn't want to. In that case, he didn't want to offend the devotees, the guests, the host. In another instance, Prabhupada said, we have to leave here immediately. He was staying at a life member's home, and the devotee said, why? Because we're getting too comfortable. We're eating these big feasts, and I can see that you're not getting up early. You're getting too comfortable. Let's go. So, time, place, and circumstance. Okay. So, Prabhupada writes that it's a special function of human society to be religious. Animal society has no church, mosque, or religious system. In all parts of the world, however, downtrodden human society may be, however they may be, there is some system of religion. Even tribal aborigines in the jungles also have a system of religion. When a religious system develops and turns into love of God, it is successful. Let's see. And Prabhupada talks about avoiding the association of Mayavadis and atheists. Okay, now, here is the big controversy, not controversy, but you may be scratching your head after reading this and thinking, how can I do that? So let's read about the 50% rule, and let's talk about it, okay? In this verse, there is a brief mention of the process of making loving transactions with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and making friends with the devotees. According to the Dadati principle, an advanced devotee is supposed to spend at least 50% of his income on the service of the Lord and his devotees. Srila Rupa Goswami has set such an example in his life. Okay, so I'm going to share a PowerPoint about the 50% commandment. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So Christians, they have something called tithing. Tithing is when you give 10% of your income to the church, okay? That's called tithing. What do we have? Give 50%. The Bhagavatam says, to give charity is one of the householder's main functions, and he should prepare to give in charity at least 50% of his hard-earned money. And who is this for? Grihastas. Charity is meant for the householders, Prabhupada writes in the 16th chapter. And where charity should be given to ISKCON initiatives, the householders should earn a livelihood by an honorable means and spend 50% of their income to propagate Krishna consciousness all over the world. Thus, a householder should give in charity to institutional societies that are engaged in that way. So now the question is what the word income actually means. Generally, it means revenue minus expenses or net income, money earned after all costs. That's a lot different than 50% off the top, right? For those of us who know a little bit about money. Okay. Now you might feel a little less anxiety. Is the word income used in other ways? Yes, sometimes it indicates all the money that ends up in your hands. Should we give 50% of all the money that ends up in our hands? It doesn't seem that Srila Prabhupada meant it that way. It appears he spoke about the money left after expenses. Here's a quote from the Srimad Bhagavatam. As we have suggested before, one's accumulated wealth may be divided into three parts for distribution, namely 50% for the service of the Lord, 25% for the family members, and 25% for personal necessities. The tone of Srila Prabhupada's instruction to give 50% is universal. Taking it as meaning 50% of all the money that ends up in one's hands, one's full salary, for instance, would make it extremely difficult for most people, right? Unless you were really, really bringing in crores every month. It appears that Prabhupada was talking about the money left after essential expenses. So 50% after basic expenses? Yes, this is what it seems Prabhupada meant. Everyone has a tendency to give something in charity. Krishna says, give it to me. And this means that all surplus money accumulated should be utilized in furthering the Krishna consciousness movement. So what actually constitutes surplus money? More money than for the bare necessities. One should not try to possess more than he needs for the bare necessities. If one gets more than is needed, the surplus should be fully engaged in the Lord's service. And what's the consequence of not doing this? One's wealth will remain tainted with bad karma, which will produce suffering. By worship and charity offered to the Brahmins, material possessions are purified. Are there other consequences? We may develop a miserly mentality, right? Why you keep money? Utilize it, distribute it for Krishna. That is Brahmana. The money belongs to Krishna. So if we spend it properly, conscientiously for Krishna consciousness movement, then it is properly utilized. Otherwise, he becomes a creepina, a miser. And missionary activities are good for the good of humanity. Charity should be given to the devotees of Krishna who are engaged in his devotional service to spread the Krishna philosophy or Krishna consciousness throughout the world. Krishna consciousness is the benediction to humanity. That charity given to spread Krishna consciousness is the greatest charity in the world. And what happens when we all give? Devotees will feel richer. There is always something to donate. Our economy is aligned with dharma. We have a freedom from the mentality of scarcity and fear that cripples the mind. Educators will be maintained and projects will flourish and we'll be able to spread the holy name. And people will be benefited and Krishna will be pleased. When everyone gives, everyone receives. So final words, spending 50% for the service of the Lord for propagation of spiritual consciousness in society by way of the Sankirtan Yajna is the maximum display of human society. So when I meet young grihastas, people who just get married and they sometimes have very little money, I tell them at least try to get into the habit of giving something to Krishna, even if it's 50 rupees a month. Just get in the habit a week. Just get in the habit of giving to Krishna. So it seems from this PowerPoint that the 50% idea would come after your expenses, and because I think unless we're very well-to-do, we really are making a lot of money, it would be very hard to give 50% off the top, wouldn't it, for most of us? Yeah. And even then, even 50% of the net, some of us may be hesitant, so I'm not saying this way or that way. I know, and I think we talked about this like 3 weeks ago, but for myself, I'm 62 years old and I want to eventually retire and move to India and not have to worry about money. So I'm also trying to set aside some money for retirement so that when I'm retiring, I can do full service and I don't have to be in anxiety about where the next chapati is going to come from, or from, especially for my wife. I mean, I want to make sure that she's taken care of nicely, right? That's a Grihasta's duty, is to make sure that, and therefore I think I told you this, when I told my son ever since he was like 5 years old, your biggest dharma in your life is you have to take care of your mother for your whole life. I told him that from, practically 5 years old up till now, when he's 29 years old. And I know he will do that. He's a good boy. So I know that this is, a tricky point, but Prabhupada does bring it up many times. So we have to at least consider it. But this is the presentation I made is at least more of a practical way that we could think about it. So what are your questions or comments about this? Is everyone speechless and shocked?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. The money spent on devotees' gifts and giving prasadam, does it come under giving?
Yeah, you can count that, yes. Yes, of course, you're giving to devotees, you're following this principle, yes. Yes. Yeah, that's a very good question, but sure, of course, giving gifts to devotees. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanavats. This is Navdeep.
Yes, Mataji.
I'm sure as devotees, all of us here who are in the class, all of us are giving. But I'm sure most of us are not tracking the percentages.
Acha.
So, and for various reasons, just as you said, we may have other responsibilities, children who have to be educated, savings for the future, etc. And I actually even heard of this from my parents as well. It is better to give now when you have it in hand than to think sometime in the future,
yes,
when everything is set, you will then give that 50% away.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to come to that stage of thinking, because some of it is you're driven by fear. We don't know what inflation is going to be 10 years from now, 5 years from now. We don't know what the condition of society is going to be.
Right.
So is it okay to think you will have greater capacity to give later on in life once your core responsibilities are taken care of?
Well, Mataji, that's why I said what I said, that I always like to tell young grihastas that get into the habit of giving something to Krishna. Even if you can, like I said, even if you can give 50 rupees, 100 rupees per week, whatever, but just get into that habit. It's such an important part of a grihasta's dharma. And we do know, we all know that sometimes as we get older, we start, our income increases, right? You go from a junior associate to a senior associate, and, the different, if you're a lawyer, you start getting a good reputation, and you can start charging more for your appearances in the courts and things like that. So there's some practical considerations. I can't change what Prabhupada said. That would be bogus for me. So I have to say what Prabhupada said. He said 50%. And at the same time, we do what we can. But I think it's good to get into the habit of giving something. But like you're saying, we have to be a little careful. It's just like, I'm sure we've all met people who say, when I get older, then I'll become devotee of Krishna. Right? And that becoming older may never happen. Right? Or we probably heard, when Krishna wants me to surrender, then I will surrender. Krishna wants you. It says right in Bhagavad Gita. You read it right here. So there's practical considerations, definitely. And I don't know if this is bogus, because I do set aside money for my retirement. But the reason I'm doing that is so that I can do full-time service. Right? Not so I can just, go to Goa and just lie on the beach all day, right? Or Mahabalipuram or whatever. Right? That's not my That's not my reason for setting it aside. So I think this is where the request of the Guru, Prabhupada, meets and we just have to try to figure out a practical way to carry out that, or at least work towards that. And not just, so what we're trying to avoid, Mataji and all of us, we're trying to avoid the idea, oh, that's impossible. Prabhupada would change it if he was here today. We can't say that. So we should respect it very much and at least do our best to try to come up to at least work in that direction. Even if it's 1%, then 3%, then 5%, whatever, or 20%, then 40%, but we should work towards fulfilling Prabhupada's request. Is that all right, Navadip Sachi Mataji?
Yes, it's all right. I mean, I think in the back of our mind, sometimes you question whether this kind of fear itself is acceptable. It means you're not fully dependent on Krishna, right? It speaks to your own level of faith in the Lord, right? So to a certain extent, that doubt also creeps in your mind. If you're fully dependent on Krishna, then really you shouldn't have to worry about anything.
If you're fully dependent on Krishna, you wouldn't be a grihasta. And then you'd have no financial problems.
Yes.
When I was a brahmachari, I think I told you this, right? All of my possessions fit in a box about this big. 2 dhotis, 2 kurtas, sleeping bag, bead bag, and book bag. Bus, my 3 bags. It was a very nice life. I never thought about money. Never even entered my mind. So,
sounds blissful.
Yeah, very nice, yes. Money, let's see. Manikanda Balachandra says, in today's world, we are used to spending, being in a spending culture and having lots of liabilities, loans in our hand. Ideally, there will not be any savings. How can we handle this situation? Well, isn't it interesting? When I first moved to India in 1988, I remember people saying, being in debt is a disgrace to the family, right? And people bought things with cash, and if you couldn't pay with cash, you just didn't buy it. Now they've picked up on the Western idea that you buy a house on mortgage, you buy a car, even poor people buy their cell phone, right? In installments, isn't it? Right, like that. So it's unfortunate, maybe in some ways, because what happens is then you're stuck in the consumer society, and you get sucked into, you're just a one number amongst millions in a consumer society. And so we as devotees should be careful. We may need to do things like this, but a mortgage on a house can be kind of like a 100-kilo weight on your feet. So we have to really be very cautious about how much. It used to be so easy, right? If you couldn't afford it, you just didn't buy it, right? But now you can buy everything on credit, right? You can buy cars on credit. I know that for sure, and cell phones and just about everything. So I agree with Manikandan that we have to be careful about being sucked into. Prabhupada really liked that quote from Mahatma Gandhi, simple living and high thinking. So we do have to be careful. I did buy a car about 5 years ago here in America, on loan. I was so happy when I finally paid it off. I was like, But now I only buy used cars and just pay cash, bus. And then, Hare Krishna. Okay, so now Radha and says, when we have to share some donation amounts to many other Vishnu temples in South India, where our parents want us to share our contributions. So some of it may not go to ISKCON initiatives. Well, that's a detail that I can't say much about. You have to work things out with your parents and balance that with the fact that we know that when we're giving to ISKCON, it's going to the Sankirtan movement. It's going to spread Krishna consciousness. Not all temples are in that mood of preaching, and not all that temples may have the absolute purity of philosophy. But at the same time, you may have to deal with your parents. So I can't say much beyond that. Yeah, I don't know. Next question. What are the instructions regarding charity to non-devotional purposes? For example, if someone's child has illness and the parents struggle to meet medical expenses, especially if they are not known or related to us in any way. We get to see so many such requests when we try to use various, online portals. Well, we don't want to be callous to people's suffering. But have you ever heard of a USP, unique selling point? Right? So our USP is that we are serving the soul and not just the body. Right? And so there's so many charities. They're doing this, they're doing that. There's so many in all over the world, and especially in India. And so what is it, 17th or 18th chapter, charity in the modes of material nature. So charity given to the right person at the right place at the right time is in the mode of goodness. But other kinds of charity are in passion and ignorance. So like when I used to have to go to Delhi often. I'm living in Vrindavan, but I would go to Delhi. So I learned this. Did I tell you this? I think I told you this a few weeks ago. I learned this from Krishna Chandra Prabhu, Rishi Cape Muffatlal, that I would always bring prasadam with me. And so when there was beggars at the stoplights, giving them money they might just use it for sinful activities, or they may have to give it to somebody who's forcing them to be out there. But you give them prasadam, and they get benefited, right? And immediately they put it in their mouth. So they've taken prasadam. They're very fortunate. So it's really good as much as possible if our charity is connected with pleasing Krishna. It can seem a little callous. It can seem a little cold-hearted, but it's really watering the root instead of trying to water each leaf, right? And if we give to something like, when we do prasadam distribution, so that's not only food distribution, it's distribution of prasadam. And giving someone a book, Prabhupada said, even if they just touch the book, they're benefited. Even if they don't buy it, but you hand it to them and they hand it back, they're benefited. So this is the training that Prabhupada gave us. It can be a little tricky, and we may have to, explain it in certain ways when we're talking to non-devotees, but we should try to, especially give in charity in a way that will benefit the Sankirtan, will help the Sankirtan movement, because that is the Yuga Dharma. That is what actually helps people. It really does. So I like to give donations a lot to the BBT, because I know that then they'll print more books and people will they'll be able to sell those books to the temples at a reasonable price. And I also like to give. Now, you know how we can, how do I pronounce your name? Saidhanam. You know how you can spiritualize this? You can do it for devotees. Because there are sometimes devotees do this GoFundMe projects, or you hear about a devotee who needs a surgery and doesn't have money for it. So you can do Vaishnava Seva at the same time that you're giving charity. So that might be a way to do two things at once. Vinita says, what is the right age to retire? Well, Lord Chaitanya retired at 24. I think Sankaracharya retired from like 8. Right? It really, who can say? I think what is the general retirement age in India?
58.
58.
Acha. Is that maybe that's because life expectancy is less? Because here in America, it's 65 and life expectancy is around 79.
It's because of the population.
Population.
Oh, because of population. Acha. Okay.
Give
Population.
opportunity to youngsters.
Oh, I should live in India. I'd be retired a long time ago. Hare
Government
Krishna.
services 60, Prabhu. Government services 60 is the retirement age.
Acha, acha. But if you're Marwari, then 80 is retirement age, right? You just keep doing your business. Correct? Yeah. So retirement age is as soon as practical. That's the answer. I didn't say as soon as possible. I said as soon as practical. Right? So that we can maintain ourselves and our family. We can dedicate our lives to seva. But grihastas should not prematurely retire, but they also don't need to. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says you can stay if your household is Krishna conscious, you can just carry on. But even then, what does vanaprastha life mean? Well, one simple thing is no more children, right? Sexual things are khatam ho gaya, right? So that's one simple definition. And you're starting to gradually at least focus on Krishna and less on our entanglement in this world. Prabhupada once said that 50 years old is like Krishna tapping you on the shoulder and saying, you're not going to live forever. Right? So we may not be able to do vanaprastha, right? Quit our jobs and this and that. Our children may be still somewhat young if we had children a little later in life and this and that. So it depends on our individual, but as soon as practical means that the children are growing up, we have some savings, and we don't feel the urgent need to keep in the passionate world of business or working, and we really are starting to feel an urge to perfect our life by doing more chanting and more hearing, and in this age more preaching. But it's a very nice life. It's such a nice life. And also vanaprasthas have so much wisdom. We've been through so much. We can pass on that wisdom to the younger devotees, to the new grihastas. Every vanaprastha should have some nice new grihastas that they're mentoring, that they're helping deal with things. Because young newlyweds, they have so many questions. Oh my God, what do I do when I fight? How do I deal with my mother-in-law? So many questions, right? and we can be a little bit more like, dire, it's okay. You'll be okay. Don't worry. Just chant Hare Krishna, do your best, and don't pick up the phone when your mother-in-law calls you. That's a joke. Okay, so Vinita says, my father retired at the age of 60 from very renowned government post. Now at 63, working a nice private post. He is a devotee. I am trying to convince him to leave and be free, but I'm unable. Any suggestions which can help me? Maybe if he could talk to a senior devotee who he respects, that might help, and they could talk to him. Yeah, it's hard to preach to your father, isn't it? Sometimes it's not such an easy thing. You could find quotes from Srila Prabhupada. There's many strong quotes, and we don't know. Maharaj Katvanga is a good example. He got the information that he only had, he didn't know. So he asked, well, let me know how much longer I have. Well, actually, you're almost about to die. Okay, I immediately renounced everything. So it might be good to talk to him and be a good listener. This is what we're teaching in our conflict resolution. He may have some reasons. And if you become a good listener, you might find out the reasons why he's still working. But some people, they're very attached to working, isn't it? So, but I would suggest, Vinita, the first thing is just ask him, Pitaji, why are you, or whatever we call it, whatever you call your father, help me understand. You quit this other job, big government post, now you have a nice private post, and you're a devotee. So help me understand why are you still so enthusiastic to keep working? Because he probably knows the philosophy of his devotee, but there's something else going on. And sometimes being a good listener can really help him see things as they are. Okay, so we did one verse in one day. Haribol, we actually finished that. So let's look at next week. We are doing we're doing verse number 5, a very, very beautiful verse about how to respect different devotees. So yes, just read verse number 5. That will, and of course do whatever other homework is being sent to you. And Achyuta Prabhu, any other announcements, Prabhuji?
Nothing else, Prabhu. So obviously there is a big message which has been sent on the examination and the pattern and things like that.
Yes,
So
yes.
it will take some time for the devotees to digest about it. It's quite intriguing,
Yes.
especially the closed book examination.
It's okay. It's a piece of cake. No problem.
Yeah. But Prabhu, maybe you have a minute or so. So His Grace Krishna Prabhu is on the call. You may want to, both of you, exchange some pleasantries between the both of you. And
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances.
My obeisances to you.
And my obeisances to all the wonderful students here. I have one point to make, is that whenever we talk about Srila Prabhupada's instructions about what percentage of income one should offer to Krishna's service,
Yes.
That kind of makes me very nervous most of the time. Because it puts a huge responsibility on the temple management's managers to conduct themselves, to conduct the temple, to run the temple, to run the finances of the temple in a very careful, frugal, honest way, so that maximum amount of money gets channelized into direct preaching,
Yes.
Sankirtan. So we don't want anybody to feel, or definitely devotees in ISKCON to feel, that getting a certain percentage of the income of the congregation is our right or privilege or something. But it's actually a tremendous responsibility that we owe to the previous acharyas, to Guru, Gauranga, to Srila Prabhupada, because when they come and they offer whatever it is that they offer, so we have to be worthy of that. We have to be worthy of receiving that. So that's the feeling I have. So I thought I'll just share with you all.
Thank you, Varda Krishna Prabhu. That's very kind of you. Yes, it is a great responsibility to the kind of responsibility that you have taken on in Prabhupada's service. And yes, So it is exactly time, and I'm very grateful and a little embarrassed that Bharata Krishna Prabhu is attending this sometimes.
Prabhu, I've been attending all classes. I've not missed any.
Acha. Well, you know, Amito Kangal. What to do? But thank you, dear devotees, for your association, for your wonderful questions. And please keep this in mind. This verse is so important, that our desire, Tandara Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanivas, Jananme Janame Hoy E Abilas. My only desire is to live in the association and serve devotees. So please, let's try to cultivate that mood of Vaishnava Seva. It's so powerful. So thank you very much. It's time for me to take rest.
Panchakalpatarubhyasya kripasindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.
Jai ho.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, devotees.
Hare Krishna. Rasasindhu Prabhu, is there any other further announcement? Or?
No, Prabhu, no other
Nothing
announcement.
else. Okay.
I think the exam notification we sent, so maybe as you said, once people have kind of digested the content of that, we can have, let's say, one session maybe off the class time to just kind of prepare people for the exam.
Yes, sure. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam. Have a blissful weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.